looks like we are good to go. All of the connections worked smoothly. I was a little bit worried because there's clouds and a little storm at my house and the internet's a little sketchy on those days. So fingers crossed it holds out. But
it's windy out there.
Yeah, I want to welcome everybody tonight to talk about Pronghorn. I'm pretty excited. We are on webinar number 12 in our 15-part series. So it's amazing to me how fast it's gone and how much we've covered in such a short amount of time. So if you missed some of the previous webinars, we've recorded all of them and placed them on the department's YouTube channel. This will be the next session we post. I'll get it up tomorrow, probably midday sometime or mid-afternoon. We'll get it posted on the YouTube channel. So if you miss anything, you can come back and watch it there. We will be going through this topic tonight, talking about Pronghorn. But if somebody is more comfortable speaking in Spanish, let us know. We do have a translator in the attendee list, so we can bring him in and he can translate for us. For those of you that are here in Zoom with us, we do have the Q&A box going, and you can type in any questions and we will get to as many relevant questions as we can throughout the conversation. And for those of you on Facebook, we'll also try and keep track of your comments and bring your questions into the conversation as well. So I think that is some of the housekeeping stuff. Some of the most important things coming up are the dates listed on your screen. So the 2022-2023 draw is open for applications. So if you haven't done them already, make sure to get those in. I haven't done mine yet, so I have a few more weeks to get those in. I believe 21 days exactly to get them in, but who's counting? If you did apply for the Bear and Turkey draw, the results are posted in your customer portal. And the next important date is March 9th at 5 p.m. And anybody who applies before then will qualify for one of the incentives that our partners have put up for people that apply early. And so everyone that provides a valid email address will get a discount for Onyx. We have several different items such as an external frame backpack and gift certificates for people. We have some really cool businesses like Game On Outdoors out of Farmington that has some really cool designs on hats. The archery shop in Albuquerque, there's a lot of really cool incentives to apply early. And then, of course, the big deadline is March 16th at 5 p.m. So make sure you get all of your applications in before that deadline. You don't want to miss it, trust me. We will cut it off at 5 p.m. So don't be late. And I think that is all of our important upcoming deadlines. But Tony, the important question, have you done your applications yet?
I did my first draw for the Bear and Turkey, and I successfully drew turkey, so I'm very happy about that. But I have not put in for my big game draw yet, so we're waiting until the end on that one. Hopefully not late, but we'll bring it to the limit.
Well, a little less than 21 days right now.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yep.
So I want to start out. Tell us a little bit about you and your background, and what does your job entail? What does your year look like?
Yeah, so I have been working with the department for almost 3 years now. I got my master's out of Texas A&M Kingsville, studying pronghorn in the Texas Panhandle, as specifically looking at their interactions with agricultural fields and kind of helping to work with farmers and landowners and deal with nuisance pronghorn, as they like to call them. Yeah, that's kind of where I got my start with pronghorn. And I got this job 3 years ago, and now every year I get to do what I love the most. So we every summer we survey for pronghorn, and I'll talk a bit about that later too. It helps us inform a lot of our decisions for hunting and whatnot. So I sit in a fixed wing plane and we fly, I think, just over 4,000 miles a year. And it's 80, 90 hours in the summer. And that's a big part of my year. I then analyze all that data. I work with several private lands programs, including our pronghorn ones with Ranch Wide program, the Pronghorn Conservation Recognition program. I administer female immature tags to ranchers who are struggling with pronghorn overpopulations. And so I'm working with a lot of those groups. I help a lot of my fellow biologists conduct their surveys for elk and deer. Oryx I did that this spring. And I do a lot of other private lands programs like E+ and help assist with that as well. So it's a lot of dealing with the public. Sometimes I get to go out in the field and do cool things. And I was just on a capture for that northern migration herd that we're monitoring. We got to put out a bunch of colors for that too. So I stay busy throughout the year and throughout the day.
Absolutely. And I feel like it's safe to say that pronghorn is not only your job, but one of your passions in life.
I love it. Yeah. I frequently wear pronghorn related shirts that I've been gifted, and was lucky enough to harvest a New Mexico pronghorn. I think it was in 2019, and he's mounted on the wall over there. But that's the first thing that greets you when you walk into my apartment. I love pronghorn.
That's awesome. I always love your passion. Whenever I talk to you or hear you do a presentation, there's no doubting your passion and your interest in it. And I am jealous that you drew tags because I have not drawn one. So maybe in the future one will be there. And I'm guessing a lot of people listening are also sitting in the same boat as me.
Probably, yeah. And that's why I'm here. I'm here to help navigate that field.
So when I travel, especially if I'm headed out of Santa Fe up towards Raton, or if I head down to our Roswell office, it seems like there's quite a bit of pronghorn here in New Mexico. So how many do we have approximately?
Yeah, right now we're right at around 71,000 pronghorn for the state. We have been going up over the last couple of years. We've changed some survey methodology to make it more standardized and accurate. So some of those numbers are reflecting that change in survey methods, but definitely over the last 3 or 4 years, we've been right around that 65 to 70,000 mark and going strong. Obviously, that kind of I-25 corridor is the key point going north from Las Vegas all the way up to the Raton border. And that's where we see most of them in the state. I'd say probably 75% of the pronghorn live in that northeast corner between I-40 and 25 there. So
about 75% of in that corridor. That's that's why you always see so many from the freeway.
Yeah, yep, absolutely.
It does seem like there's a lot down towards Roswell. And then also when I'm on the west side of the state out towards Quemado, it seems like there's quite a few out there as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's approximately 20,000 pronghorn in the southeast corner of the state, and I think it's around 10 or 12 in the southwest corner of the state. Really, the northwest is the only one that has some pretty small populations and very, very pocketed populations, but the rest of the state has quite a few.
And you mentioned the herd that I have found most interesting since I've been here, and that is that migratory herd. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it goes from Tres Piedras up to Tierra Maria, and they migrate.
Yeah. We collared those pronghorn. I think the first one we did was the summer of 2019. We put out a few what we as biologists call Judas collars. Those are we target a few individuals that we know are a part of the migratory herd, and then we let them kind of tell us and show us the route so we can put collars on a lot of other pronghorn. We have found out in the last 2 years that those pronghorn are actually sitting all the way up against the Brazos cliffs there in TA, and they go all the way from the edge of Unit 4. I think one of them even cut the corner of 51A, and they go all the way out to the Rio Grande Gorge, right on the edge of the gorge every winter. So they make probably the longest ones are making close to a 50-mile migration every year. And it's really, really cool to see that. And elevation gain, they're at 10,000, 11,000 feet, and then they travel all the way down to the gorge, which I think is 7.5. So it's really cool.
And moving through those ponderosa forests, I just feel like I've never even seen antelope in that type of habitat.
Yeah, I've gotten a lot of reports from hunters that are elk hunting up there or deer hunting up there, and they're sneaking around a grove of aspen because they hear something moving, and it turns out to be a herd of pronghorn, and they're very confused. So I get some phone calls, yeah, it's really fun to tell them about it. So.
That's crazy. Yeah, I heard one story of a hunter putting up tree stands to hunt pronghorn. I was like baffled.
Not the usual way to hunt those. That's
So one of the questions that came in on this topic before we move on is, do you know, or do you have a goal for the number of pronghorn in the different populations across the state?
I don't think we have so much a number goal as we do just having a healthy herd goal. We like having buck doe fawn doe ratios that line up with what we see in healthy herds in the wild. Usually we like maintaining them at a slightly growing population. And that way you can actually, there's some biological fundamentals behind it, but there's a curve to how productive populations are. And if you're harvesting on the uptick of the curve, you're actually able to continue harvesting a higher number of animals while still increasing a population. And so we're trying to keep most of those populations in that area. Not all of them can be as productive as the Northeast because habitat and rainfall and a lot of other things fall into that category. But we really do shoot for maintaining a buck to doe ratio of about 33 to 100, 35 to 100, somewhere in there. And then a fawn doe ratio of like 30 or so fawns to every 100 does. And that's usually just indicative of good, healthy ungulate populations.
Okay, very, very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
That was a great question. So thank you for taking that one off the bat. But,
of course.
So outside of that migratory herd, because I feel like they're a little bit different than most of them in New Mexico, but what does a year look like for the average pronghorn here?
Mm-hmm. So I like starting out with fawning because it's a nice, pretty hard date. Fawning occurs in May. Usually there is some flux. The Southwest has been having fawns later in the year. There have been some that our biologist Kevin Rodden down there has noted, I think as late as June or July even, that they're hitting the ground. But routinely for most pronghorn, it is a May dropping point. The does will go off to some of the more pristine habitat that we have from loud areas or roads, stuff like that. They go to native rangeland with good vertical structure, and they'll drop their fawns there so they can kind of tuck up underneath something and avoid aerial predators in addition to our four-legged predators in the state. And so they kind of try and tuck them up underneath there. And then those does and fawns, they'll stick together for a couple weeks, just in the mom and the fawns that she gave birth to. And then the other does and their fawns will get together and they form what we call like babysitting groups, kind of, and daycare groups. And those fawn or the females will take turns kind of leaving their fawns with the other does, and they'll go off and refuel and get more food and make sure that they can still produce milk for their fawns, and then they come back. So you'll see sometimes 2 or 3 does with 20, 30 fawns running around them. And so that's what they do all spring. The bucks are off just trying to get nutrition and focusing on getting ready for the rut in the fall. And so they might be hanging out on the outskirts of some of those fawns, but usually they're in bachelor groups, just eating and trying to produce better horns. And then you move into the summer, they continue doing that. The does start weaning their fawns. And usually right around August is when you start seeing some pre-rut activity. Males will start grouping up with their does and marking some territories. Sometimes you might see a buck fighting another buck in August, but it's usually a little early. And once you get into kind of that first 2 weeks of September is really when the breeding starts. Those bucks have found their does, they're protecting their harems, they're breeding those does. And that's what happens from pretty much the whole month of September. Once you hit the end of October, early November, those bucks will go off and start doing their own thing again for a little bit. And then they all come together for a nice big winter group. Pronghorn, especially, I know you're from Wyoming, so you've probably seen it, but in the winter, pronghorn groups can get up over 500 head. They really do get this big group mentality to find food sources that are available, and they kind of look after each other. And so all winter long, they'll form these big groups until about March or so, and then the bucks will go off and do their own thing and form those little bachelor groups, and then the does kind of take care of themselves until they're ready to drop those fawns again.
So then in the summer, when they're kind of in their different groups, and you said that's when you typically fly your surveys, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what are you looking for when you fly the surveys in 4,000 miles? It sounds like you should get a lot of frequent flyer miles, though I don't think that the plane will allow that in this case. But
yeah, I don't think so.
But yeah, how do you fly those surveys and how do you use that data?
Yeah, so we try to get as close to the hunting season as possible because we don't like surveying when the bucks and does are doing their own thing. We want those to be as commingled as possible. So we really do. We'll fly the plane up till the day before archery season starts in the state, just to try and get where we're not, only flying over groups of does or we're only flying over groups of bucks. And we want to keep that buck doe ratio as good as possible and as accurate as possible. So we wait until right before the hunting season starts. I usually start flying in July, and then we go up until that last day. We have mapped out pronghorn habitat for the state using some of my predecessors before me using some mapping layers that have been done. And so we took all the pronghorn habitat in the state, and then we go through and we randomize 10-mile long rectangles by 1 mile wide. And so we go through and we fly on one long end, and then we circle around and come back on the other one. And it's, you're just sitting there staring out a window, and we've got we do what we call distance sampling. And basically we're looking at how far the pronghorn groups are away from the plane. And we know how far we can see at the elevation we fly at. We fly at 200 feet above the ground. And so at 200 feet, a certain angle out of the plane will be a certain distance from the plane. And so we're able to see groups of pronghorn and identify how far away they are from the plane. And then we look at essentially how much ground we've covered from the air, and then how many pronghorn we've seen in those groupings. And logically and statistically, you're going to see more animals closer to the plane just because they're closer. Pronghorn only. A big pronghorn would be 120 pounds. I mean, that'd be a giant male. And so they're little things. And believe it or not, they blend in pretty well to the landscape. So it's easier to see them as they're closer to the plane. So we punish ourselves for pronghorn that we see closer to the plane, and we put, animals that we're seeing further away, we're expecting to see less of. And so we run that through a big statistical analysis, and it gives us an output of density that we've seen by looking at that. And then we're able to transform that density into how many pronghorn should be on the landscape.
Wow, very, very interesting. It's such an intense process, and I'm not sure I will ever totally get it, but I know it takes a lot, and that you guys put a lot of effort and time into it. But what other information do you use to get your scientific recommendations?
Yeah, we do look. One of the biggest things that helps us a lot is actually harvest reports. So people that haven't turned them in, you're late, but please turn them in. We do rely on that data a lot. The questions in there about whether you were successful in harvesting or not is probably one of the biggest ones. We also take a look at, how many days people are hunting in the field. That should be some indicator of whether or not they're seeing a lot of pronghorn, or if they're spending a lot more time searching for them. And so we look at a lot of that information. We also look at buck-doe fawn ratios. As I mentioned earlier, that can be pretty critical for whether or not a population is increasing or decreasing, or if there's something going wrong. A lot of times, we're seeing 700 pronghorn in a day from the plain, and just tallying that stuff doesn't give you a really good idea day to day. And so when we're able to sit down and you think you saw a lot of fawns until you sit there and you say, wow, we saw a lot of does compared to how many fawns we saw. And you're able to kind of tease out those numbers, and usually they reflect drought conditions a lot. When we've had hard years, those fawn crops do not do well. But we're able to see, how big of an impact that's having. And if we get 3 or 4 years of bad fawn crops, we can adjust tag numbers and stuff in certain units. And likewise with buck-doe ratios, if our buck numbers drop too low, obviously that would be a hunting related matter. There's not much that only targets males and not females other than humans. So that's a guide for us at Game and Fish to determine, whether or not we can continue harvesting males at the rate we're harvesting them. So those are probably the two biggest thing that go into pronghorn, at least, is that distance sampling and the buck fawn doe ratios and success rates of hunters.
Yeah. There's so much that goes into it. One of the things you just mentioned was the changing to the rule and adjusting tags. And I wanted to just put a plug in because you are, I was going to say knee deep, but I think you're probably deeper than that in the rule setting process. You've been working and put together some recommendations, and you have a public meeting tomorrow night. Mm-hmm. That's just on the Zoom platform. It won't be broadcast on Facebook, but it's on the Zoom platform, and you'll go into the recommendations that you've made and let hunters and people know how they can provide feedback to the department. So I would encourage everyone to get involved, because now's the best time to get involved in that process.
Now's the only time for the next 4 years. Much. It really is important. We do rely a lot on public comment. If you want to have a say in what happens in pronghorn hunting for the next 4 years, provide your public input. There's an email address. I think it's Pronghorn Rule or something. But it's been posted on our website a lot. If you have any comments about the date changes we're recommending, bag limit changes, anything like that, please email us. That all goes into public record, and that's the way to make sure that you're heard in the state.
That's awesome. And we did a whole session with Elise about the rule setting process, and that was in January. And I thought it was really interesting to think about all the ways that you can get involved and how the process is going to go with presenting to the commission and the public meetings and how to have your input. And if you're interested in getting involved in that, which I would recommend, I'd check out that webinar and just get an idea of how the process works, and then tune in tomorrow night on the Zoom platform, register and attend that meeting and get that information. But Tony, we've talked a lot about the surveying and kind of the overall populations, but is there anything that we missed overall with how the populations are doing, or any of the buck-to-doe ratios or anything?
No, I think we're doing pretty well. The Northeast is still continuing to grow, which is good. That's one of the areas where we've continually increased tags and allowed opportunities. It's probably one of the best opportunity spots in the state to get drawn. And we're really continuing to try to manage that herd in that way. We've had a few rough springs the last couple springs. Even last year we were flying, and I mean, we flew the western third of the state, but it was very wet, and it was like, this is going to be great. And then fawn numbers weren't that great again. So the Northeast has seen a couple low fawn years, but the population as a whole is continuing to go up. So hopefully we get some rain or snow or something for those pregnant does. Southeast is maintaining where it's at. The northern extent of the Southeast is increasing around like the Fort Sumner area. I forgot what else is over there. Clovis, kind of in that general region. Numbers are going up still, which is good. The Southeast has quite a bit of oil and gas activity, and pronghorn herds are spotty at the very southeastern corner of our state. Northwest is good. It's very variable in terms of rainfall, and that has a big impact down there. We do have, I think our buck-doe ratio is a little high. We have quite a few bucks that were observed on our surveys, but we also have very few surveys sightings of pronghorn from the plain down there. It can be kind of tricky to find the groups. So that was a little, the buck-doe ratios are a little different down there. And then the Northwest we have probably, I think, just under 1,000 pronghorn in the entire Northwest corner of the state. It's a very difficult area to hunt. A lot of people just target unit 2 when they get drawn for the 2, 7, 9, 10 tags. But that population, we're working with other groups, and I just sat in an hour and a half long meeting today discussing those herds and how we can help rehab their, figure out what's going wrong and stuff like that. So.
I love how you throw that out there, 2, 7, 9, 10. So that I'm assuming that's GMUs 2, 7, 9, and
correct.
10.
Yeah, correct. Okay. Sorry. Yeah. Those are the GMUs. We lumped those 4 together. It basically makes up the whole northwestern corner of the state, other than GMUs 12 and 13, which kind of are in a little bit of both. So
a little further south.
Mm-hmm.
And you had mentioned draw odds, and I hear frequently from people, I've put in for pronghorn for 20 years and never drawn. But I know you were checking out the draw odds earlier, and you kind of come up with some numbers that made me cringe a little bit. I understand them, but it kind of made me go, oh, I may be putting in for a while before I get a tag. So what do the draw odds look like? And kind of looking at them, what's some potential recommendations for residents over non-residents?
Yeah.
Or residents and non-residents.
Yeah. Looking out there, just as a whole, draw odds in some areas of the state, in particular, units like 12, 13, 15, 16, and 17, kind of the north end of the Gila. I'm not 100% sure why, but we get a lot of applications for that area. There are some really nice bucks in there. I'd say it's more of a quality unit than a quantity unit. Those bucks tend to kind of tuck back up in the pinyon juniper pockets and get old, and in turn get big. So it's kind of nice to chase some of those trophy bucks in there. There's definitely potentials of 80, 85 inchers running around out there. And so I think maybe some rumors about that have spread around out there, and people put in for it. But looking at how many people have put in versus how many tags we give out, just the most basic of odds, I mean, you're talking between 1% and 5%, with some units as low as a 0.5% chance out there. So if you are one of the individuals who is putting in for those units and has been complaining that you have not drawn in 10 years, it might be another 10. Those areas get a lot of applications and don't have a lot of tags to give out because our herds are not that large over there. My biggest recommendation, if you want to get drawn, is to pick up a bow and arrow. A lot of our units throughout the state for archery hunts, your odds are between 10 and 15% of being drawn. And I know archery hunting can be difficult, especially for pronghorn, but those odds are much, much higher. And then I'd say it's kind of a gradient around the state. So the Southwest would be a little bit better than that Gila area, the northern part of the Gila that I just mentioned. So the Southwestern units in the boot heel, 25, 26, 27, 21, kind of that lower end there are some of the a little bit better. And then shifting over to the southeast part of the state is even higher, better chances of getting drawn. Units 31 and 32, 33, those over there. Great hunting. I'd say there's quite a few pronghorn running around. And I've seen several pictures and heard several reports of 85, 90 inches being taken in the southeastern corner of our state, in the Roswell area. So there are giants out there. And then transitioning into the Northeast is where your best odds are going to be. It's where we give out the most tags for the state. Some of those units are having 50 per hunt. And that's going to be your best opportunity at not only seeing pronghorn while you're hunting, but also harvesting and getting drawn. Probably the most important part for the other two, but yeah, you get drawn first, and then you have some pretty good odds of seeing pronghorn and shooting pronghorn. They aren't, I'm not saying you can't shoot a trophy out there. I shot, mine was 70, 71 or something like that. It's a great buck. It was my first. I loved it. It was a trophy to me. But if you're going out there hoping to shoot an 85, 90 incher, you're probably not going to see one, much less shoot one. Those are definitely great units for first-time hunters and people just looking to engage in pronghorn hunting. It's really awesome in that kind of northeastern corner of the state, which I guess GMU is 58, 59, 56, 47, 40, and 41. Those will be the units where you have the best odds of being drawn.
And I think by the smile in the picture with you and your antelope, I know, you and your pronghorn, yeah. it is definitely a great picture. So
yeah.
One of the things that when you were going through those units, and I think about kind of that northern Gila area, the northeast corner of the state, and some of that, the eastern side of the state, a lot of that is private land. And so can you tell us a little bit about the private land program and how those ranch-wide hunts look?
Yeah, so we have a program within the department called the Ranch-Wide Program. It covers, basically what it does is it allows ranchers who are leasing public land, whether it's BLM, Forest Service, State Land Office, if they're leasing that land, they are allowed to hunt the public land within their ranch boundaries. And in turn, they allow public hunters who have drawn a tag in that unit to go and hunt their private deeded acreage. And so I think we have, I want to say there's not many right now. There's probably only 6 or 7. But those 6 or 7 ranches open up over 70,000 acres of private deeded acreage to public hunters. And every year, right around June or July, I usually shoot for the beginning of July. I try to post maps of those ranches on the pronghorn hunting page on our website, which can be a little tricky to find. It's under hunting lands and maps and private lands and then pronghorn. But it's in there, and I post that ranch-wide map every year. I think you can even do a quick search for it in our search bar. Those ranches are open. You don't have to ask for permission before going on those private deeded acres. They just kind of let you go out there and harvest animals on their private property. And I think the biggest part is just knowing what public land you can hunt and knowing how to identify it. And I think we've done a segment on that maybe this year, but I cannot stress enough that pre-scouting and e-scouting is one of the most important parts and tools of hunting nowadays. Knowing where you stand exactly and what public land you can access legally is the difference between a really good hunt and a really, really bad hunt. And those consequences can be pretty rough. So when I draw a unit, or even before I put in for a unit, I always try to look for those accessible public land. Again, county road layers, county road maps, looking for squares that touch those roads and that look like pronghorn habitat. That's always my first go-to. And then I weigh the draw odds after that and see which ones kind of balance out. And I think that's super important. You can hunt BLM, you can hunt state land office. We lease that as a department for hunters in the state. You can hunt U.S. Forest Service property, and I don't know if there's many other public ones, but those three for sure are the big ones in the state. Know where they are. You can get maps from the BLM's website. Carry Maps has it on there. You can get state land office land maps from the state land office website. Or, if you want to buy OnX, I have it. I use it all the time. There's some fantastic tools out there for finding public land and getting to it legally and safely. So use those tools.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's so many options out there to help people. And I don't know, there's sometimes I'm old school and like to get a paper map and a compass and a GPS.
And that's fine. I don't like having my phone charged all the time, and it sometimes only lasts for a day or two, and then you're hosed. So I think it can be really important to have those paper backups or use them as your primary. You just don't want to get caught doing something that's illegal and not, having those tools at your disposal and ignoring them really doesn't, allow you to just walk onto private property. So know where you're walking and just be really good about it.
And on those hunts on the private land hunts, is there a way to identify those prior to the draw? If you don't post the maps until July, are the maps from last year relatively similar, or what's the best way to plan?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So those ranches have been continuously signing up since the rule change 4 years ago when we got rid of A+. Those ranches signed up immediately for the ranch wide program. The ones that are on there it's a pretty fair bet that they will be enrolled again in the previous year or in the next coming year. But don't 100% bank on it. Those ranchers sometimes want to go for it and other times want to choose a different route. So they're good to kind of bank on a little bit, and you can, keep that in your back pocket as a tool. But I think, they're kind of just a little bonus on top for those units that you get. If you get drawn for that unit and you go in July and see it, then go for it. But don't 100% plan on those ranches being there for before the draw. So,
and on those ranches, you said you don't have to have permission. Is that correct? They're already essentially open for public access.
Yep. Just for pronghorn hunting. They don't, it doesn't count for deer or elk or anything like that. But for pronghorn hunting, their private deeded acreage on their ranch is 100% accessible. You don't need written permission. You can just go out there and hunt it.
Perfect. And so if a ranch is not signed up in that, I'm assuming you would still have to have the written permission to access that property, even if you have a draw tag.
Correct. Yeah. So if you do draw a tag through the public draw, you can hunt all public land in the unit that's legally huntable. Make sure there's no, unitization agreements or anything like that. We do have some public land that is not open for hunting, but you're allowed to hunt all that public land. And then if you also happen to know some private landowners in the unit, all you need to do is get written permission from that landowner, and they can sign that over, and you can go out and hunt that private property with your public draw tag. I usually recommend that whenever someone gets that permission, it should include a few things. I know Rex kind of touched on it a little bit, but I do like having the hunter's name on there, the landowner's name and signature, the dates that they're going to be hunting, including the year, because you don't want to, have a hunter coming back from another year. I like including that, and I like including the species as well, so that if you gave them written permission for deer, that it doesn't also count for pronghorn. I like seeing those big ones on there are usually kind of the important ones. Whatever you want to do above and beyond that is fine. But I I think most of our game wardens appreciate it when you include all of those elements on there. It just makes their job a lot easier, and it makes ranchers feel a little safer about who's out on their property. So that needs to be done if you're going out on those private lands. If you happen to not draw a public draw tag, we do also have over-the-counter private land licenses for pronghorn. And all units that have public hunts have those private land licenses, and then even a few extras where we don't have either enough public land to hunt or where the herds are located only on private lands. Some of those units have private land licenses you can buy over the counter. Those licenses are good for the seasons. When you walk in, you'll tell them, I want to hunt, the first rifle season for 41, let's say. And they'll just vend you that license. You don't have to have your written permission when you go to buy that license. But anytime you are actively hunting or scouting or out on private property with a rifle, you have to have that written permission on you, and you need to make sure you're within your private ranch boundaries. Those private land licenses are not good on any public land. And so you cannot trespass on public land to use that tag. It's only good for private land in the GMU that you purchased it for.
I would imagine it would be appropriate to get written permission from the landowner before you purchase that tag.
It would be, yeah. It's a better deal than just running around with a tag that you cannot or have no legal access to use. I don't know of many people that would want to spend money before they guarantee they can hunt somewhere with it. It's a very good idea to do it first. But you don't have to show the clerk at Walmart or something your receipt or your written permission. But anytime you're in the field, you need to carry that written permission on you. It's extremely important. So
absolutely. Did I hear you correct? With those private land tags, you have to declare your unit, or is it good for any unit statewide?
Nope, you have to declare your unit. So when you go to buy a private land tag, go to our rule and information booklet, look up the public hunt code that would correspond with the unit you want to hunt in and the dates you want to hunt. And then you go in and you buy an over-the-counter license for that unit and for those hunt dates. And then you are allowed to hunt as many ranches as you can get permission for in the whole unit, but you're confined to the GMU boundaries.
Okay, thank you. I wanted to make sure I heard you correct. Okay. So one of the things we talked about with elk and deer is that you have your first three choices. And we talked with Kevin Rodden on Monday and talked about, how you could possibly structure those and how you could use a draw odds report to help give yourself the best possible chance at drawing one of those. But with deer and elk, we have a fourth and a fifth choice. Do we have that with pronghorn as well?
We just had a hunt this last year. So normally we don't have any depredation style hunts, which I believe is the fifth choice on those, that says you're willing to go anywhere in a certain whatever and hunt. We don't normally have those. I think our last year was the first kind of depredation style hunt that we had for pronghorn in a while, and that was on the Melrose Air Force Range in Unit 32, kind of at the north end there. They were having some safety concerns with pronghorn interfering with base operations. And so we did have some disabled veterans who marked on their fifth choice that they would be willing to participate in those hunts. And we did a draw for those individuals and selected them. But we don't have, as a rule, for the most part, we don't have quadrant hunts for pronghorn, which would be your fourth choice for any hunt in the Northwest or Northeast or whatever like that. We don't have any of those hunts, and we don't have any depredation hunts for the most part. It doesn't hurt to fill them in. It's not going to punish your draw odds in any way or anything like that. But in the event that we do have another hunt, like the one on Melrose or something like that, it could possibly benefit you and get you a tag when you didn't draw one. But I think the best thing if you don't draw is to go back for the leftover tag sale that we do in, I think it's June or something like that. So
June.
I could be wrong. I don't
remember.
it's somewhere in the summer. It goes quick, and there usually are not a lot of pronghorn tags in that sale. Most people that get them, we give out all the tags we have in the state for public land. I think there's a few for youth that show up every year where we did not fulfill our quota in those units. And so we'll resale those youth tags, but they go very fast. So.
Absolutely. Okay. So I want to jump to a couple of questions really quick and then come back to some of the outline that we've skipped over so far. But is it a good idea for a non-resident to apply for hunt units with buck to doe populations exceeding the 33 to 100, assuming that would mean that there's more tags available?
So because we have to balance public land availability with those populations, it's not 100% just based on the buck doe ratios in those units. As a non-resident, the best thing you can do is go for tags that or units that have tags. If you look at the draw odds report, please download it and look through the units where non-residents have drawn tags. Most of the time, it's only 1 or 2 tags per hunt. And anything under 5 as a non-resident, you're not going to draw. And I believe it's actually like 10 under 13 or something like that is where the break-even point is. So those hunts that have 15 or more tags is the ones that you need to apply for as a non-resident to get drawn. And I think you can be picky all you want about units and trying to, go for a quality hunt versus a quantity hunt and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, there aren't many non-resident tags that get given out through the draw. And it's just difficult to get a tag as a non-resident in hunting New Mexico. Your best option is just go for the units that have good odds and try to get that tag, and then work your butt off scouting and finding those pronghorn groups in those units. That's just the best advice I can give to non-residents. Just play the odds because it's tricky.
It is tricky. As a resident, it's tricky. So as a non-resident,
yeah, it's hard enough as a resident, but when you're looking at a smaller slice even than that, you've got to put in your homework, really plan for those things, and if you don't get it, try to make friends with a landowner who would be willing to give you permission to buy one of those over-the-counter tags to hunt their ranch. Perfect.
And I know that it's relatively new in the process and there's probably not a lot of information out there, but with the changes from the A+ program to the current system, have you seen a large change in the number of bucks harvested?
Yes, but as a matter of, we've also seen over 2,000 license sale increase as well. So part of the change that we made was to increase opportunity for hunting pronghorn in New Mexico. Public lands can only handle so many hunters out there at a time. And so the ability for private landowners to give permission to hunters who could not get drawn really opened up a door for more sales on these licenses. We went from just over 4,500 a year. And I think right now we're currently at 6,700 for this last year that we sold. So we saw over a 2,000 tag increase in the last 4 years. Many of those tags, we did increase our draw tags in the state, I think by 400. But the other 2,000 or slightly under 2,000, 1,600 tags are coming from those private lands in the state. And so because we've seen that increase in tag sales, we have also seen an increase in pronghorn harvested. Over the last 10 or 15 years, our success rates in the state have stayed right around 72 to 78%. Pronghorn are relatively easy to kill on rifle hunts. Most people are successful within a day and a half. So that success rate is held true even with the rule change. And so when you increase tags by 2,000, we're increasing our successes, or not our success, but the number of bucks harvested in the state, for sure.
Okay, and for a not directly hunting related question, are there any alterations that can be made to fencing to decrease predation of pronghorn and allow access to more resources?
Absolutely. Yeah. One of the worst things for pronghorn is net wire fencing. And I'll say it again, net wire fencing, terrible for pronghorn. They cannot cross through it. They cannot jump over it, or they will not jump over it. I guess they possess the muscles to do it, but they do not jump fences as a rule. I think it's something like maybe I think it's like 4% of the pronghorn population will jump a fence. It's a super low number. So net wire fencing where they cannot go under it is terrible for them. Coyotes use it to predate on pronghorn. They'll actually kind of trap them into a corner and then just eat them against the fence. The best thing you can do is either 4 or 5 strand barbed wire. If you can possibly make that bottom wire smooth, sometimes the barbs can kind of dig into their backs and leave a nice little scar down it. Doesn't really kill them, but I'm sure it's not pleasant for them. But getting that bottom wire up around 20 inches is the best thing you can do. It shouldn't allow most calves to go under it. But it'll allow pronghorn. They have a nifty way of kind of getting down on their knees and turning their head sideways and sliding right underneath, and their back legs kind of fold up inside their abdomen a little bit, and they just tuck right underneath it. 20 inches, I've seen pronghorn hit fences at 45 miles an hour and go right underneath them. Once they find a good crossing, they'll continue using it. And that 20-inch mark is really what we shoot for.
Okay. Thank you. I thought that was a great question from our Facebook followers. But
absolutely.
Back to some of the hunting questions. Can you clarify where or whom to contact regarding participating in the ranch tags, the private land tags?
So participating in the ranch tag. So are you talking about like participating in the ranch wide program as a landowner, or buying a ranch tag from a private landowner?
I'm going to guess, let's talk about both because we have questions on both sides of that. So where do you find the yes, let's talk about both sides of that.
So with the ranch wide program, if you are a landowner looking to enroll in that program, I am the person you talk to. We'll go through all of that paperwork together. I also have that paperwork on the Pronghorn website page. You can look up ranch wide on the little search bar. It'll pop up. The landowners, we do have a deadline of April 1st, so I can get all those properties mapped and put online so that hunters can view those and plan their hunts. As a hunter in the state, if you want to buy a tag from those individuals, we do list their phone numbers and names with those maps that I publish. Those landowners get one free buck tag, and then I assign tags based on how big their acreage is as well. And some of those landowners do turn around and sell those authorizations to hunters who can use them. If you're talking about, so that's the ranch wide agreement side of things. If you are looking at buying a private land ranch tag over the counter and hunting on a ranch in New Mexico that is not a part of a ranch wide agreement, then we do not have a list. That is something the department doesn't maintain. That would be a lot of work. That's what the old A+ system was. There were over 8,000 ranches that we were trying to keep track of with one person. It's a lot of work. So we don't maintain a database of landowners that are selling over the counter tags. I know we do maintain a list of guide and outfitters that is on our website, and a lot of times you can contact them to either get permissions through them to go hunting on ranches and stuff like that. The other way is just good old door knocking and county plat maps. But we don't, there's some Facebook groups out there where people are selling these tags as well, just through themselves. But that's really the best way, is just to talk to those landowners, because the department does not maintain records of who is allowing hunting on their private ranches.
Perfect. And then in July-ish, when you post those ranch only tags, my mind is going too fast.
The ranch wide tags.
Thank you. The ranch wide tags. When you publish that list, does it have contact information, or are hunters just encouraged to go scout and hunt it?
No, there's contact information on there. It has the name of the landowner, their phone number. I don't know if it includes their address. It might. And then it has the number of tags that they've received and the map of their property.
Okay. And if you don't draw out and want to get one of the private land tags, I'm assuming that you can go ahead and purchase the over-the-counter tag, even though you applied for the draw.
Correct. Yep. There's nothing wrong with it. I recommend that to a lot of people that are just like, yeah, I want to go hunting. And, even for non-residents, that definitely put in for the draw first, even if you have low odds for it, put in, because it's way easier and probably cheaper than going the private land route. Put in for it, see if you draw. And if you don't, then turn around and after July 1st, you can purchase those over-the-counter pronghorn tags. And that's what you do after, if you don't draw the public draw.
Great. Okay, jumping back a little bit, I want to talk a little bit about hunting them specifically, but what tips and tricks do you have for somebody? Does silhouettes work? Glassing? What tips do you have for people that get drawn or that have access to private property?
Yeah, I think the biggest first thing to do is know where you can hunt them. So public land, make sure you know where it is again, and private land, know your ranch boundaries. That's probably the most important thing, is that you're legal while hunting. And also safe. But I recommend going out and scouting somewhere between a month before your hunt and 2 weeks. Pronghorn should have their ranges kind of set up already by then. They're starting to think about breeding, and so those bucks are going to be setting their groups up. And I went out and drove roads, public roads, just driving and stopping at every little rise you could see, jumping out and just getting glass binoculars and looking across the landscape. You can see those white butts from miles away out there, and they're usually just kind of standing around, especially in the early mornings until about midday, and then they start bedding down, and they get a little more difficult to see. So go out early, scout, find groups, just locations where you see them, and subconsciously kind of make note of whether they're in little valleys, trying to get green stuff, or if they're up on top of hills in areas where there's maybe not as much green vegetation. If they're up on top of hills, it might be that they're not really, the food isn't a super big factor for them right now. But usually you can find pronghorn in greener patches on the landscape. They like eating forbs. So anything that kind of flowers in the summertime, they're going to be looking to eat it. And that's just make note of kind of the plant communities and what it looks like where you're finding them. And that'll help you a lot in a month when you're out there hunting them. But I look for those groups, take GPS locations, get out, walk around. I think state land, you need 14 days, or you get 14 days before your hunt to go out and scout. Take advantage of that. And then if you can't go on those lands, at least drive down the public roads and take points. Pronghorn aren't going to move much more than a couple of miles away from where they were. So you should be able to see them out there. That was a big deal. It helps a lot. And so I did that right away. And then coming back into your actual hunting time, the night before, I usually, even 2 nights before, I'm looking for the buck or group of bucks that I kind of want to target. If you put them to bed the night before, chances are, if you're up and in there before the sun comes up, those animals will be exactly where you left them. They don't move much at night unless they've been spooked by something, and they don't have fantastic night vision. So usually they are right where you left them at sunset the night before. And so if you find a great buck, take a GPS point and walk, maybe a half mile away from him and just sit and wait for that sun to come up, and he'll be right there. And then I think you can't stress enough just having good optics, whether it's on your rifle for the shot, or whether it's a spotting scope or binoculars for when you're looking for the groups. Being able to see several miles is just such a key point of hunting pronghorn. They might be right next to the road, so you don't need it. But if you're out looking around for them and you're pulling up binoculars and getting areas where you can see a lot, chances are you'll find pronghorn. When it's hotter during the summer months, pronghorn do find water sources, and they will frequently use them. I know, especially for archery hunters, that's a big point for them, is finding a water source and setting up a blind. It works. It's a telltale, the pronghorn have to drink. But the reality behind it is that pronghorn can get water they need from food for anywhere from a week to 2 weeks. And so they could potentially not even need to visit a water source if it's wet enough and there's good enough vegetation around. In areas where it's dry, or if we have a really dry summer, those pronghorn will be frequently visiting water holes. And it's a good way to kind of maybe cut down on your need to walk around and let the animals do the walking. They'll visit those water holes frequently. And then spot and stalks for archery as well with silhouettes. If the bucks are in the rut, and they sometimes, just like with deer or elk, you get a buck who is not really feeling the battling side of things with other males and couldn't care less that you have a silhouette, and might even avoid it. But there are other bucks that, if they're in the rut and they see anything that looks remotely like a pronghorn, whether it's a silhouette, whether it's a white flag tied on to a pole on your pack, whether it's a handkerchief you're waving, or the inside of a ball cap or something like that, if they see movement and it looks white, some of them will run right up to it to find out what it is, because they think it's another male or a female who is not a part of their harem that they would like to be a part of. So silhouettes do work, but it has to be the right buck and at the right time of year. And so if you're not seeing a lot of that rutting behavior, it might not be a fantastic alternative for you. But I've seen the cow targets work too. I think there's cow silhouettes now. I've seen those work too. Pronghorn are just very curious critters, and they will go walk up to anything they think is out of place. And so that can help a lot. Most of the time, rifle hunters don't have those issues and don't need anything like that to really help them. For them, it's more of just glass and shoot rather than spot and stalk. And so I think one thing to be cognizant of, especially with archery hunters, the northeast part of the state does not have a lot of vegetation that gets tall. In some areas, it looks like a golf course out there, and pronghorn can see over 5 miles away. I think it's 5 to 6 miles away. So if you are just walking across an open golf course looking field, they know you're there, and it'll be very difficult to get a hold of them. I think archery hunting up there can be pretty tricky. A lot of people look for areas with maybe cholla, cactus, or pinyon juniper to kind of make those transitions a little bit easier to sneak up on those animals. So keep that in mind when you're putting in for archery hunts. Northeast area doesn't have a whole lot of that standing, vegetation that you can hide behind for your stalks.
Great. That's a lot of great tips. I'm always interested in how curious pronghorn are. And I was with a youth hunter last year on her first hunt, and we literally had no cover like that. We just stood up and walked straight to them, and they stood there and watched us. I was like, I don't know how that works, but but it
Yeah.
works.
And once they feel uncomfortable with you, they'll usually turn sideways.
Mhm.
For hunters is great. But they'll walk straight at you, and then they'll turn when they feel uncomfortable, and they'll do a half circle around you. And they'll kind of maintain a similar distance to where they felt uncomfortable, and they'll just run in a big half circle. And if you move at them, they'll run away, but they just do that little half moon shape, just to keep looking at you, I think, a little bit more and try and figure out what you are out there. So they're very curious.
And Tony, you mentioned using a flag to attract their attention, and it sounds like there's some states that don't allow that, but I'm not aware of any rule or regulation here in New Mexico that I believe they're allowed.
I haven't heard of that. I think in New Mexico it's legal. I guess check the rule and information booklet. If you're planning on using one, call a game warden, your local game warden. That's something I always look up to before I go out to the area. I look for the local game warden and I put their number in my phone. They are super responsive. And anytime you have a question about the legality of something, give them an email, give them a call, whatever. Get in touch with them. So yeah, I don't know if that's illegal in New Mexico. I haven't heard of that, and I haven't thought that was a thing, but maybe it is. So
it sounds like it's a rule in Montana, but I'd be happy if anybody has that question, shoot me an email. I know everybody in Zoom has my email, or if you're on Facebook, send us a message, and I'd be happy to look that up and confirm, but I'm just not aware of anything right now.
Yeah, I'm not either for New Mexico. I think it's fine. And if a flag does, if you aren't allowed to flag, ball caps work. I've seen people just wave those, and I don't know.
Perfect. Okay, Tony, we've covered a ton of ground in the last just over an hour, but is there anything that you had in your mind that we haven't covered, or that you had wanted to talk about?
I don't think so. I saw you had disease on your stuff. I just want to assure hunters out there. So CWD has not been detected in pronghorn. They are their own family, away from cervids. So they're not part of the deer family. They're not related to deer or elk or anything like that. Their lineage is much older than that. So they don't get a lot of the same diseases. They get some diseases that sheep get, like scabies and stuff like that. There's nothing that is really transmissible to humans as long as you cook your meat to an adequate temperature. So you can cook it medium rare, that's fine. That's probably the best way to eat pronghorn, but make sure it's medium rare. Do not eat raw game meat. That is not not advised. There are parasites and stuff that could be transmissible to humans. But if you're cooking your meat, you're absolutely fine with consuming pronghorn.
Great. Thank you for that clarification. And
Mm-hmm.
we got a couple of questions about the rule setting, and I just want to remind people that tomorrow night we will be hosting a meeting to talk specifically about the recommendations and to solicit public comments. I would definitely encourage people to sign up for those. If you look at our news releases, we have one that was titled Bighorn, Javelina, and Pronghorn Rule Setting, where'd it go? Hunting Rule Topics of Public Meeting. And so it has all of the information and all of the links to sign up for that Zoom tomorrow night. So I strongly encourage people to check that out. But Tony, I don't want to keep you because I know it's a very busy time of year, as is the whole year for you. But I do want to share some important dates because we can't share them enough. I don't want people missing any of the deadlines. So please make sure and write those down. March 9th is the deadline to apply and qualify for the incentive program. And so if you're interested in getting the Onyx, they're actually giving everyone who applies early and shares their email address, so we can contact you with the information. They're going to give a free month subscription and a discount, a free month trial and a subscription and a discount to a subscription. Wow, I'm tongue tied tonight. But we would be happy to share all those. They're on our website, so you can check out all of the incentives. And then on March 16th is the big deadline to not miss. So make sure and put those in your calendar. As I mentioned, tomorrow night we will have the public meeting to talk about the pronghorn, bighorn sheep, and javelina rules. And then next Wednesday, we're going to be talking, similar to this conversation, we're going to be talking with Caitlin Rule, who is one of our bighorn sheep biologists, and kind of going through the same type of outline and learning a little bit more about hunting bighorn sheep in New Mexico. But I want to thank everybody who joined us here in Zoom and on Facebook tonight. We appreciate all of the great questions and the conversation. So thank you very much. And Tony, we really appreciate you and your time.
Of course, yeah. And just one thing, I really want to thank all the hunters as well that are on this. Again, your contribution to wildlife is insurmountable. The money that you spend on hunting gear and all that excise tax that goes in the Pittman and Robertson funds, it funds conservation for wildlife, and you guys really are the heart and soul of what we do. And we do live to serve the hunters in the state. And so I think it's so important to continue getting people into our sport and to encourage kids and other groups of people that have not been included in hunting for a long time. Just continue that so we can continue having populations that are huntable for kids and grandkids and stuff like that. I think it's super important, and I can't say thank you enough for everyone that participates in those sports.
And there's no way I could add to that and have it be beneficial, because that's absolutely a great statement. So thank you very much, and good night, everyone.